The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents U.S. Animal Husbandry Training Interrupted. But before he begins, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Now, let's receive Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Vadimakum. We're going to have this continued conversation. For the most part, as we've talked over the years, most of you know that I've been quite consistent on dealing with the civic matters of our people. Not that there are not other interesting and important subject matters for us to deal with. However, I look at the position of our state of affairs in this concept and perspective. If we don't address some of the very root problems that are analogous to the injuries that are been imposed upon the people, the secondary things, or what you might say the dressings of life, matter very little. Another analysis I would say is this. If your house is on fire, it's not a time for discussing the style of the furniture or the colors of the paints on the walls. And I take that position. I've always taken that position to try to seek out truth and deal with root, or what you call causal aspects of problems, as opposed to being distracted by or preoccupied with the effects, which you may also refer to as symptoms. Not that I would ignore them. No, I would not. However, I approach things from a perspective of dealing with root of the problems, and then watching or seeing if the effects or the symbols or the effects or the outcomes, etc., are affected for the sense of curing. As an example, another example, if your house is dusty and you have some kind of an allergy, you would consider, air cleaners, making sure your carpets are well vacuumed, your floors are well cleaned, etc., so that you don't have sources of dust or things that would harm you. Now, in the reality of what we're dealing with now, the operatives of the Roman Curia, and when I say Roman Curia members, because I know most of you have heard me make reference to the Roman Curia members for quite a few years. And many of you know that I've been stating issues about the Roman Curia members for quite a few decades, actually. And in the last few, say maybe 10 to 15 years, I've been putting more emphasis on Roman Curia members. And those would include, so that, because I want to make myself a little bit more clear, because a lot of times when we're doing these treatises and we're having these little talks at the House of Reawakening Minds, we have limited times, and a lot of things that we would get into in detail would not be afforded us by virtue of the limited time that we have. And then also, due to the fact of the Indexus Librorum Prohibitorum and Indexus Librorum Expurgatorius operations that have been a constant, and particularly since they've been enforced more readily as of late, some things that we can't necessarily say totally bluntly because they will immediately censor. And of course, that's the Prohibitorum and Expurgatorius, which we've been telling you about for years. And you may call it shadow banning, you may call it censoring, etc., but it's Prohibitorum and Expurgatorius, exactly what's happening. However, and again, because the members of the Roman Curia are accelerating their what they have referred to as their capitulation culling. So the capitulation culling is actually where they make reference to the people being so beaten down or made docile by way of the animal husbandry training that has been enforced, particularly since 1902, although unofficially executed or instituted prior to that. But we'll say officially with the founding of the General Education Board by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, which we have redundantly presented their philosophy to you on at multiple times to warn you of our own injuries or our adopted injuries of psychology or psychic attacks that have actually been placed within us via animal husbandry training, via the General Education Board, etc., and all of the institutions set up for or via the U.S. corporation operations at North America, particularly, and exported actually into other um, uh, territorial jurisdictions that you refer to as nations, etc. Now, many of you also recall that over the years, when I would communicate with some of you who have communicated with me directly by mail, etc., and you have noticed that I would often refer to referencing the territorial areas that I domicile, and I would say, as an example, Philadelphia territory, etc. And then I would put zip exempt, and then you'll see me say non-resident, non-domestic, non-subject, with very firm um, action in that area. And some people over the years have been very critical of myself and my approach to this, um, thinking that or taking a position that I'm anti-government or anti authoritarian type thing. And the reality is, I operate from the perspective and the knowledge that these people who our people have been trained via animal husbandry as being their government, I knew at a very young age, and I could sense it, that these people were not only imposters, but as I grew older, I, by knowledge and research, recognized that they were indeed imposters and frauds, and in fact, not our friends at all. Over the years, I find that it makes some people uncomfortable when you tell certain truths, when we begin to recognize that we have been not so responsible in our own affairs in relationship to these people that we've been calling government. And because they've been taking, as of late, again, as I said earlier, the capitulation culling operations, they've accelerated them. Now, the capitulation culling activities, in layman's terms, would be this: murder the heirs, murder the creditors, murder the inheritors. Now, that's a fact. Now, as you know, through the years, we've told you about 55 Water Street. We've told you about Seed and Company, etc. We've told you about driver's license fraud, and the fiction of driver's license being used as a form of identity, and then people not knowing the danger of that practice, and or even the motive behind it, that is deeper, far deeper than most people think. And so we address this again to encourage you to have a greater comprehension on why certain things we've said over the years. I'm going to I'm going to read a few things from one of my older books, addressing misunderstandings of the purpose concerning Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali, Noble Drew Ali, the Moorish Divine National Movement. Many of you familiar with that. And I'm going to read a part, and keep in mind what we're dealing with, and what I'm implying is that the interruption of the animal husbandry operations or training is related to more and more people around the planet becoming more cognate and conscious of the frauds created by these imposters who have been pretending to be government in service of the people, which they never were. And as we've said over the years, that these people are parasites. Now I'm going to deal with nation, nationality, and nationalization. And this is on page 66, 67, 68, etc. Now, nation is derived from the Moorish Latin word natal, which is derived from nasi. That's Nasci, nasi. Now, nasi means to be born and pertains to one's birth. Confirmation or proof of identification is vital in national matters or issues of particular jurisdictional importance, and in matters of involving issues of consanguinity and primogeniture. Now, other relative or derivative words are of nasi are national, native, natural, nationality, etc. Nation is a distinct part of the human race or people characterized by common descent, language, and history, usually organized as a separate social political state and occupying a defined geographic territory. A nation would also refer to the people of a particular or particularly defined nation in the affairs of government and nations. Considerations of jurisdictions and authority are always at issue. And when any matters of law and commerce or economics are involved, jurisdiction is involved. Nationality is a state or the fact of being recognized, a recognized part of, or having connection to a nation. The common national name of a particular nation is the national identification and affiliation name, and applies to or is given to all members, and quote, this would be conditional, citizens of that particular nation. Now, this common national name is the social and political indicator or confirmation of nationality. The intentionally or internationally recognized identification is confirmed by and harmoniously connected to the pedigree or birthright national name or cognomen. As an example, the continent of Asia is the geographical location of China. The members are citizens of China or Chinese by pedigree and by political jurisdiction, affiliation, and or allegiance. The continent of Africa is the geographical location of Egypt, which is Misrem or Hikupta, and the members or the citizens of Egypt are Egyptians by pedigree and by political jurisdiction, affiliation, and allegiance. Continent of North America is the geographical location of the nation of Mexico. The members or citizens of Mexico are Mexicans by pedigree and by political jurisdiction, affiliation, and allegiance. The continent of Europe is the geographical location of England. The members of citizens of England are Englishmen by pedigree and by political jurisdiction, affiliation, and allegiance. The continent of South America is the geographical location of Peru. And the members or citizens of Peru are Peruvians by pedigree, political jurisdiction, affiliation, and allegiance. This principle of geographical locations or territories are a specific nation's political state, quote unquote, a confirmed existence and locale geographically, a national pedigree and political jurisdiction, affiliation, and allegiance, etc., are proper civilization standards for true national identification. And this applies to all people or persons in all legitimate issues of jurisdiction, sovereignty, and claims of constitutional rights, etc., and or authority, etc. Nationalize and nationalization. Nationalize and nationalization is that quality or that state of rendering national in character. To nationalize is to admit into, reclaim, or to make a part of a nation, or to bring under the jurisdiction and control of a nation, to make a citizen, or to authoritatively claim property of and or for a nation, etc. That which is nationalized, whether person, subject, or matter, takes on the social and political nature of things concerning jurisdictional issues and matters of proper or quote unquote just authority. Thus, the proper jurisdiction in respect to that particular and specifically identified nation or natural being, person, etc. Naturalize and naturalization, distinguished from nationalized or nationalization. Naturalize and naturalization is that political act which confers, clothes, or conditionally grants rights and privileges to a citizenship or upon a foreigner or alien. Now, I'm sure that any thinking Moorish American can quickly make the distinction between nationalize and naturalize. And one can also surmise the wisdom of Noble Drawley in knowing the difference between nationalization and naturalization. Now, Moors are aboriginal and indigenous to the Americas, and their natural citizenship to the land is a historical and birthright fact. So Moors pardon me, Moors were the dominant political sovereign factor in the founding of this great contemporary republic, whose jurisdiction was established by way of constitutional law in the central North America. Moors need only to be themselves in propria persona sui juris, in one's own proper person, self. Moors established organized government on the American continents well over 10,000 years ago. Moors can naturalize alien Europeans or others whose origin is from political states in Asia, Europe, etc. However, no one originating from any other recognized continents can lawfully naturalize a Moorish American, because the Moors were the first true natural inhabitants of the land and are the true heirs apparent of the land. Droit. Question: how did Noble Drew Ali begin to uplift Moorish Americans? Answer: by teaching them to be themselves. Question: what is the science that treats of positive law? Answer: jurisprudence. Question: what is the legal and lawful status phrase which indicates or pertains to one who is being one's self? Answer: in propria persona sui juris. Question: what does in propria persona sui juris translate into universal Latin, English? Answer: in propria persona sui juris is the ancient and modern law phrase which means in one's own proper person, of one's own right, and not under any legal disability or power of another, and having the capacity to manage one's own affairs and to act for one's self. When you hear some Moors who have been studying jurisprudence say Islam, I, self, law, and master, that's what that means. That means one who has been studying herself or himself, going back to the state of mind of their ancient mothers and fathers, and discovering that the concepts that we have adopted in these late years for these last few generations has actually been mind control, psychic attacks, and animal husbandry training. Many of the people who have not studied or done research into the educational systems or the Sigmund Freud experiments on human brains, etc., and the psychic attacks that were designed via the political systems constructed by professors and by social scientists under the studies of Sigmund Freud, from which the animal husbandry training was derived, etc., would not be aware or would not have their guards up to examine their trainings, and therefore would not counter that training, that animal husbandry training, cognitively or consciously or competently. And of course, all as they have said among themselves, only a few generations of them having control of our children would essentially break the families up, which is exactly what they intended to do, and is exactly what they have succeeded in doing, and has much to do why we're having this conversation tonight, and why we've been having these conversations over the years, and also why many people who have been beneficiaries of the system, even including people who have been what you may have assumed to be close to us, etc., have become hostile enemies, etc., once they recognize that this information was also exposing them, and that many of them, instead of telling the people the truth about the Roman Curia member operations, they've been setting up little operations of our people, identifying with them, connecting with them, making deals with them, and being trained to do things of credit with them, etc. When in fact they all and always knew that the entire systems of the judicial branch of government had been usurped with the Organic Act of Congress 1871. It's also called the Act of England 1871, etc. Now, for people not to be honest about the political platforms that have been operating here at North America and exported around the world is both disingenuous, um, treasonous, misprision of treason, anti-human, antisocial, pathological, parasitic, fraudulent, etc., etc., etc. And I know that many people over the years have been quite upset with me for consistently speaking as I speak. But I do know this: unless the people themselves start and continue to rebuke and rebuke and rebut and rebuke and reject Roman Curia member operations, that position is considered as tacit acquiescence and consent, and it has been used spuriously against the people to justify the culling of the people. And all of these, as you have already known, as we've showed you over the years, different statements that were bluntly made by them, particularly through their Executive Order 11490, etc., and the Rex 84 and King Alfred Plan, etc., that they ruthlessly are enforcing genocide and slavery, etc. And so, as people are beginning to wake up to the corruption of the United States Corporation Company members, which are all Roman Curia members, and that would include all of the people that you have known as congressmen and senators. They have been the major trustee directors for the operation. And to hide their corruption and misprision, they have assigned other members of the Roman Curia, mostly of the Bar Association, and giving them carte blanche operations as what is known as privateers. And this leads back to what you know as Illuminati, the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, answering to the Pope, and of course to the Queen of England, as we've told you all before, with the triplicity of stars, with the two bars that they use at Washington territory, dealing with the Vatican, City of London, etc., and District of the Roman Queen, Columbia, that you know as Washington, D.C., and all of them have what you would call separate sovereign state status, or they call them the Trinity of Sovereign Cities of the Pope of Rome. And even, as you know, the area that was given to them by Polk, is called Seven Hills of Rome. And that's Washington, D.C. area, called the Seven Hills of Rome. And they've been operating or exercising their unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery operations from that territory, particularly since the mid-60s, 1860s, and officially since 1871. And they have been quite successful with their inculcating animal husbandry training, which is part of the reason why it's so difficult, I think, with many people having a proper concept of why Noble Drawley declared to the Moors, if you don't do anything else, declare your nationality. And they look at it from wrongfully and mistakenly from what they think is a religious perspective, without really examining what religion is, truthfully, and not knowing the real politics and the history, not taking it serious enough.
Could you, before you go any further, could you give an explanation for some as to what exactly animal husbandry training is?
Animal husbandry training, what they were doing actually in actually the late 1800s, truthfully, but more publicly in the 20s and 30s, they were doing tests on animals. And one of the animals, not only monkeys, but one of the animals they did with dog training. And they used rats a lot too. And with the dogs, it would be called feed and constrict. Feed and constrict. They would feed them different portions of food and then restrict them, then put them together and see how they respond, and they create a pecking order and what you call caste, etc. And they would apply that psychology in those animal experiment projects to humanity. And as a matter of fact, when they were one of the major areas where they started applying what they call the projects was actually in the Harlem area in New York, when the hybrid Europeans were killing off and moving the Aboriginal people from those areas and taking over. And then later they would start popularizing constricted buildings areas that they use for rats and the dogs, and they still call them to this day projects. And that animal husbandry training that's part of that physical experimental operations. The other part of animal husbandry training was how they would also torture the animals and see how they would respond, etc. And they applied that to the people too. And this is where you get a lot of in certain targeted areas. You'll see where there's fratricidal problems, where you see the gangs and the people killing each other, etc. That came from animal husbandry training. And the people think that that's part of what they would call hood culture, and that's animal husbandry training. It actually is. And by people not knowing that this psychology was actually inculcated or instituted upon the people through experiments and progress and programming, etc., don't suspect that the people who have been governing their lives are not their what you call honorable government, but they are actually experimenting on the people knowingly and consciously, and then applying a tithe to the people to support the programming. They just changed the word tithe to tax. And that's a fact. It's part of animal husbandry training. And so the people have been actually trained to pay for both their own genocide and their enslavement. As people are beginning to become more and more cognizant of some of the machinations that have been exercised in the name of government, the people who have been governing them have been convincing or trying to convince the people that they have been giving them benefits, etc. And this is back to where people really need to comprehend what birthright theft is. And this is where we've been over the years telling the people that the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, the driver's license, etc., all of these instruments are bottomry instruments, which are really bonds. And they actually been holding the people as surety. This is why, when we did years ago, 10 or more years ago, when we talked about the reversion or reversion of a state, and then we, I think a couple of treatises ago, maybe a month or more ago, we talked about reversion of a state, and we read that statement, and which we also have on the flash drive, where we say that we are not standing as surety for the United States or its affiliates or its franchisees. That's the principle. And the deal of it is, and the point being made is, when you constantly are stating that you're not standing as surety for the United States corporation, company, or its affiliates, etc., at any point or time, etc., what you're doing is essentially in the relationship of trustee in government offices, you're actually firing them. However, it is also important for the people have a cognizance of comprehending that people who claim to be government or who are holding any position of office in government are essentially trustees, and that they're actually using or putting liens against your estate and funding themselves. The danger of de facto government is that the operations actually enslaves the people and actually steals your estate for their benefit, and then they claim that you have created or inherited a quote unquote national debt. And this is why over the years you've always heard me said to the people that there is no national debt. Number one, they're not nationals. They're private, foreign conglomeration of corporate entities belonging to Roman Curia members who are answerable to the Crown of England, which I've told you often, over and over again, is actually members of the Roman Curia of the Circle Church and Chancery, operated from Fleet Street, England, answering to the Pope of Rome, and that they are the crown. And people keep thinking when they think the crown, they keep thinking Queen of England, etc. No, the crown is all these attorneys, bar association members, etc., which is also why in the organic constitution for the United States Republic operations that no members of the British accredited registry are lawfully to hold any office under the Republic of the United States as per Article 4, Section 4, etc. There's a known fact. That's why I've always told you that the Democratic Party, what you know as the Democratic Party, which is Ku Klux Klan, was set up to overthrow the Republic. And the bar members of the British Accredited Registry have peopled that platform, although the Republican Party has been corrupted too, so they're two wings of the same bird. Their whole missionary operations has been to overthrow the Republic. And because the people have become so docile under the animal husbandry, and now that people are beginning around the world, not just here, to really get the message that Noble Drew Ali has set up over 100 years ago for the uplifting of fallen humanity, some of the people have been starting to study and research, and they're recognizing the corruption and the de facto nature, particularly of the head of the beast, which is United States Corporation Company and all its affiliates around the world. And nations have been collapsing under the stress of the animal husbandry training and the de facto U.S. corporation operations. So they're dealing with now whether they're using biological warfare, and you know what the biological warfare is. That's being more and more open, and all of those biological operations are patented. You need to do the research on recognizing that all of these different biological agents that are being put upon the people have patents on it. They're killing off the people, the heirs, the creditors, the true inheritors, and targeting the true Americans. And this is again why they've been hiding behind American and claiming to be Americans when they're not, what you've heard me say many, many, many times. They always do things in other people's names, etc., so that you don't pay attention to who the real enemy is. And so what they're doing is they're doing their capitulation culling, which in layman's terms will be called murdering the heirs or killing off. They like to say among themselves, culling the herd, and that term is used among them often. Because the people have been used as the human capital to back the U.S. corporate government's debt, they're claiming that the debt belongs to the nationals, i.e., the real people of the land, of the organic land, distinguished from the U.S. citizen crap that they have perpetrated under the fraud of pretending that their political platform of the Roman Curia was indeed the nation, which it is not, to convert their debt onto the people, which to whom it does not belong and to whom it does not exist. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years, many of you who used to come to the House of Reawakening Minds before they did the openly did the biological attack on the people to shut people down. You remember I was telling you that Donald Trump was assigned, and I always told you I'm not supporting Donald Trump. I'm just giving you an opportunity or encouraging you to look at things a little differently. And I said to you that don't ever forget that they are fighting over our estate. So it doesn't matter who holds that office of the United States Corporation Company, that's still Roman Curia operations. Keep that in mind, distinguished from the people of the land. So don't ever forget that. So keep this in mind. This is why we've always told you over the years to recognize, say, Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution for the United States, adopted from Muslim law, etc., fatwa, where the gold and the silver coin can only be used to satisfy debt, because that is the money. Now, one of the things that they have done under the animal husbandry training has been to convince the people that their bottomry instruments of sureties that were controlled by members of the Roman Curia, which most of you are familiar with. You will refer to them as the Inquisition Revenue Services. They told you it's the IRS and the Federal Reserve, that they are possessors of the money, and when that has been a lie. The real deal is that they've been controlling the surety and bottomry instrumentalities that you often refer to as fiat, which are actually vouchers going into and out of the different 12 root numbers of, or what you call the root areas of registry around North America, going in and out of the Sister QV trusts we've been telling you about for years, attached to the World Global Trust controlled by the Popes of Rome, and of course the what you call the field administration of those instrumentalities, or what you call fixed documents, etc., or what you call adhesion contractual instrumentalities of bottomry instruments would be constructed by the field operatives, known as the members of the British Accredited Registry, that you know as the lawyers, attorneys, etc. So that's how they've been generally operating. And then for keeping the people in a state of malleability for molding, that would be your priesthood, or what is known as your bishopric, or your clergy. And of course, these different platforms, the people have over the years developed a psychology of great faith in these people, not knowing that they were actually a network of connected operatives. And so most of the time when the people look at their preachers, pastors, preachers, bishops, imams, rabbis operating in society in general, most of the people never suspect that these people are connected. The idea of the different so-called religions, the masses, and many people have criticized me over the years for having recognized and or stated the fact, because it's a fact and it's provable, that the masses in general have not been given religion, they've been given dogmata. And religion has been a front or a wrapping that has been given to the people under the auspices of animal husbandry training to make them docile and moldable, etc., for the exploitation that has been set forth and institutionalized against humanity for quite a few generations. And of course, the divine and national movement has been an honorable and a valid counter move against animal husbandry training and denationalization of the people. And this is why many people over the years, political and otherwise, have always been kind of what you might say anti Moorish movement, anti Noble Drawley, anti nationalization, or acting or anti-sovereign, anything that has to do with the divine nature of the human, etc. Because when you're talking about national or nativity, and you're talking about divine sovereignty, you're in a level of divine, distinguished from an ens legis privileged construct that can be bought and sold, etc. And so they want to keep the people in the mentality of the animal husbandry training, which is privilege and license, distinguished from sovereign divine being rights, or what is known as unalienable rights. And this is again why the issues of privileges distinguished from sovereign divine unalienable birthright are never discussed on a regular basis in public, because they really don't want the people to get a clear concept of what divine national unalienable rights are. Because once the people start getting clarity in this area, logically, they're going to start dismantling these people who have been holding offices of trust over their lives and actually have been destroying them and destroying their families, etc. And so, because of the fact that people are becoming more conscious, and because they're starting to use their common sense, which logically is in harmony with common law, which logically is in harmony with divine law, which logically is in harmony with divine sovereignty, it is a threat to the criminal operations of the members of the Roman Curia, who have permeated and infected and infested all government structures around the world, and particularly from the beast head, which you know as the United States Corporation Company, etc., which also went bankrupt again. I think it was in I think April or May of 2019, in that area again. And then, of course, they immediately launched a biological attack against the people, which everybody's dealing with again now. And then they put out new versions of their biological attack over and over again, because the world, as we've been telling you for the last 5 or so years, when we told you that the nations would stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds and that you would have a feedback loop. And a lot of people around us was saying that Taji guy was out to lunch, and that Taji guy was making stuff up and getting Moors in trouble for telling the truth, etc. And now everybody's being not hit with it, but smashed with it. Their families are being destroyed. They're losing their homes. They're losing property. The members of the Roman Curia are going into those accounts that the people thought was theirs and robbing them, etc. And many people have are confused about what to do, where to go. And of course, in the last few years, as we've been telling people here, trying to prepare people or trying to get them actually to think for themselves, we've been telling them to buy silver. And not that we weren't promoting buying gold, but we also know that most of the people would not have the access to their output energy to buy or to get physical gold, and it would be outpriced anyway. And of course, with the artificiality or the corruption of those persons claiming to be government, that they would be selling them instrumentalities, etc., or what they would refer to as paper gold, paper silver, etc. And we've always encouraged people to comprehend contract law, and that if you don't have it in your hand, you don't have it. And we've always been telling the people to take their energies out of the banks because we already know that they're going to steal it. And as you know, last year or the year before last, when we sent out those little warnings to the people, we told them to start stocking up, that there would be material constrictions. And of course, they're calling it now shipping problems, restock problems, etc. All of that stuff is by design because they want to kill the people off. They want to kill the people off. It is what you call capitulation culling. Write that down. Capitulation culling. And in their casual conversations with themselves, the politicians refer to it as culling the herd. In layman's terms, is that the people that you've been calling government are waging war on the people. They're not your government. They never were. And they're trying to kill you off because they have to return your lost estate to you. And they don't want you talking like this or having conversations like this or dealing with people who have conversations like this. And this is again why among our own people, they will send people among us who either work for the Bar Association or work with them to convince you that they're going to give you some law course to reattach you with these people and get access to the SESTA-QV trust, and so that you can have sourcing, economic sources and credits with these people, when in fact that is deceptive because they have one intention and one intention only, and that is to kill you off. And we are only being honest with you about this. We've always been honest with you about this. We know that a lot of people don't like the truth, and we know that the truth makes people uncomfortable. However, the fact that many people who have known these things have not been telling the truth and have been telling people what they want to hear rather than telling them the truth is why a lot of people's lives are being disheveled right now, because they really were unprepared, because they had faith in these people. That includes from the priesthood right on up to the politicians, not knowing that all of them were in partnership through the Roman Curia membership. Hard to swallow, but you're going to have to start facing reality and recognizing that these people have been waging war on you. Not wanting to know that doesn't change it. Not believing it doesn't change it. Not accepting it doesn't change it. What it does is guarantees that you'll be easier killed off, because when they present a cure to you on problems that they've created, it is a death spear. That's a guarantee. And for the women, we always told you about the Roe versus Wade operations, and we've been telling you for years they've been feeding your babies back to you. Any of the women that get this in their bodies, if they're pregnant, 90% of them going to abort automatically. Now, and that's happening. They ain't telling you that, but that's happening. And it will be happening. And by the time that many of you start really waking up to reality that these people are really your enemies, for many of them, it will be too late. However, that's the real truth. At the same time, because humanity is evolving, it is interrupting the U.S. democracy operations of animal husbandry training, which means by the nature of human evolution, people are coming out of the paradigm of that third dimensional energy. And as we've said to you last year and the year before, that the institutions that were created and constructed in the Piscean energy have in their constructs mostly third dimensional energy constructs. And the fact of the matter is they cannot live or survive in a higher dimensional energy of the Aquarian lights. And that's the truth. So when you're looking at these things from an astrological point of view, understand that you're dealing with energy. And it's not a matter of what people believe in or what they don't believe in. You got to pay attention to nature. And so the cognates, or the acceleration of the ascension of human evolution and development, has a natural side to it. And I think a lot of times people are looking at it from a perspective that it is a political ideology accepted, or a religious ideology that they have accepted. And I say to you this: no, it is the nature of human evolution. And many of these tools and instruments and social solace systems that have been set up to pacify humanity while they're being raped in this Piscean energy of the priesthood is by the nature of greater light dying of its own weight. And so while people will continuously try to defend the institutions of corruption that have injured humanity on such a massive scale, they will be found to be wanting in the nature of anything good. And those who have been supporting those systems will be found to be indeed what they have been, in fact, minions of the members of the Roman Curia, and they will have to answer to a newly awakened mass of people. And the tide of cognates among humanity, or what you might call the nirvana ascension of humanity, it's already in motion. And for the most part, that has been truthfully my approach to this whole thing. This is why a lot of times I think some people deliberately, and some people for lack of really comprehending where I was coming from, would not agree with or comprehend why I would not attach myself to a lot of the paradigms of the material operations of even using skills that I have to enslave myself in the material movements of the conceived operations of buying and selling and having big things that I could have or something like that. And I would not invest in that paradigm because I already knew it was temporal. And in fact, it's proving to be so now. So that's why we're having this conversation. And so as the people are awakening, and I'm glad that you're sharing this time with us here at the House of Reawakening Minds, that the animal husbandry training that all of humanity, for the most part, has been subject to for the last couple hundred years is dissolving. And of course, it makes people uncomfortable. I comprehend that, but it's unavoidable. And all of us are paying a price for having been naive and having been cooperative with these demons and these jinn. And in fact, they are both of those. That's who's been governing. Like it or not, that's the truth. So my appeal to all of us is start taking responsibility. And when you say Islam, you better mean I, self, law, and master, and start suppressing the lower self, or that selfish energy that many people have been projecting, and having the will or the intent of doing good for the sake of good, not necessarily for a reward, and to want for others that what you would want for yourselves, and do it and be that sincerely, and recognize that to be anything outside of being selfless, or it does not mean being masochistic either. It doesn't mean that. It means people with a selfish spirit will pretty much be relegated to that third dimensional energy. And those people also will be shown up for the selfish and narcissistic beings that they are, and are becoming more and more apparent, and people will start rejecting them. And in doing so, you will be shedding the demons and the jinn who are both around you, among you, and in government. And by virtue of you starting to shed them, because you will no longer have faith in them, their vampirism has less effect on you. And that's how you're going to solve the problem. You're going to solve the problem from within and reject Rome and reject members of the Roman Curia and reject their instrumentalities, etc. And that's what is referred to as the principalities and powers that you have been fighting. Now, that's the truth. I'm going to read an excerpt from some of Noble Drali's information that I placed in some of the lessons I've been given over the years. We organized as the Moorish Holy Temple of Science in the year 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civic organization under the laws of the state of Illinois on November 29th, 1926. The name Moorish Holy Temple of Science was changed to the Moorish Science Temple of America, May 1928, in accordance with the legal requirements of the Secretary of State of Illinois. I want you to pay attention. November 29th, 1926. The Moorish Holy Temple of Science in the year 1925 was incorporated as a civic organization. Now notice that November 29th just passed. I suggest that you all go look and do the research, because like I told you before, we're not going to be holding your hands, and go look into the Hall of Records, International Law of Records, and start looking at corporations that went bankrupt. And what you're going to find out is that the organizations of the members of the Roman Curia, which would include the International Monetary Fund, which is known as the IMF, Federal Reserve System, the organizations that were created under the guise of bringing peace, referred to as United Nations, etc., all of their operational charters have been dissolved. That includes the United States Corporation Company's platform of members of the Roman Curia, and a lot of these machinations that are being perpetrated against humanity to cause injury is the platform of demons trying to kill off the heirs and the creditors, etc., and convert their debt to you. However, because of the consciousness, there's enough motivation among the people now that spiritually you're developing enough power to rebuke the jinn and these demons who are members of the Roman Curia, and you're beginning to rebuke, reject, and rebut the poison and the toxicity of the animal husbandry training that has been infused upon human society for the last couple centuries. It is dying out, and it can't survive in the Aquarian lights, which we've been telling you for years. And so you're looking at that dismantlement, the dismembering of those operations, and the discomfort that all of us are feeling because we've been tied to it. Many of us have been participants knowingly, many have been participants unknowingly, and all have been affected adversely by it, except for the handful of the priesthood who have been sucking off of the people for generations, who are going to be exposed, and they're trying to help kill you off too, because they know that you didn't know that the priesthood was part of the Curia members, and they don't want you coming after them. So they're going to be encouraging you to do things like this, so they can kill off the creditors and the heirs, which we've been warning you about, which is why every once in a while, to remind you, we will go into this to show you their own writing of what they intended to do to you and what they've been intentionally doing to you. And so you also comprehend why whenever you would do anything or organize in any manner, anything that would begin to help humanity, that there will always be people who will be sent among you who would use the Moorish movement as a front for their own personal machinations. But in due time, they would start being exposed because they would have to admit in one way or another that they were really operating against Noble Drawley and the Moorish Divine National Movement, which is actually a movement for the uplifting of fallen humanity. And by their works, you would know them. And most of these people are very intelligent people, which is why they're placed in certain positions. And they will be convincing because they are learned people. And the only way that most people will not notice them or recognize them or vet them because they were not operating in their intuitive mind levels, which is why months ago we reminded you to respect your intuitive mind, because we already know that's where your divine mechanism of defense is actually at. That's where your sight is. That's where your insight is. That's where the ascended mind is. That's where the connectedness to the pineal energy and the medulla actually seats, sometimes referred to allegorically as the seat of David. So the throne of David is actually the pineal gland. The ascension is actually the activation of the pineal gland. The manifest in the physical is actually what we call enlightened consciousness, or the Christ, or the lighting of the Christ, or the Christ degree. Not a person, not a being, but it's actually the operations of divine connection of humanity to the divine self and to the divine creative powers. That's the fact. And so the deal with this, that's why they refer to the body of Christ being actually the collective all. And that's the truth. And that's what's happening. And so as humanity is evolving, the animal husbandry operations has less effect. And because they recognize that their institutions are collapsing, they want to kill off the heirs again. They want to do what they call capitulation culling, or culling the herd. And so everything that you deal with them, beware. You let them in your life, you're going to get injured. You let them put anything in your crystal stream, which is your blood, you're going to get injured. Why? Because the fact of it is, whether you like to accept the truth or not, they're demons and jinn. They absolutely are. And those among your own who have been helping them are minions of them. And the war is on. They're openly, more and more openly waging war on you. They always were. It's just that you become more conscious of it. And they're doing less what you call programming to hide what they've been doing all the time. And so their operations are being interrupted. And so I thank you for sharing this time with us at House of Reawakening Minds, because that's basically, as far as myself is concerned, because I'm only speaking for me. That's always been my mission in the first place, defeating Rome. The beauty of it is starting to see it manifest. And that's also make people angry. I know it does, but because a lot of people thought they had the hand up, and a lot of people came around us over the years and thought they were going to successfully undermine what we were doing, and then found themselves trapped in helping to get the work done in spite of themselves, and that also made some of them angry. Yes.
What happened?
Yeah. Anyway, just like
We're back.
yeah, like we've said to you before, um, keep in mind. Remember when we said to you that there's no such thing as national debt. What you have is the debt against the bishopric, popes of Rome, members of the Roman Curia, and their private foreign for profit human trafficking U.S. corporation that has been falsely perpetrated as a nation for the last couple hundred years. The debt is theirs. So don't fall for the BS like we told you before. Declare your nationality and rebut Rome, reject Rome. Do the best that you can to start taking responsibility for your families and for yourselves so that many of you can survive this attack that's being made against humanity on a massive scale, etc. And unfortunately, but real, is that you cannot trust the priesthood and you definitely can't trust the politicians. Now, that's the truth. You're going to have to start using your brain, using your common sense, studying the principles of government so that you can comprehend that these people who've been claiming to be your government are indeed failing to meet those standards. And this is a way that you can vet them for yourselves and recognize that they have never, never intended to do you any good, but have only harmed you. That's a fact, uncomfortable fact, but it's the fact indeed. And so the sooner that the masses of the people begin to ascend, because the momentum is already there now. These institutions that you thought and were trained under animal husbandry, that you were trained to make you believe or think that they were there to help you or to serve you. It's uncomfortable to know the fact that they were not. They were there to bleed you, to deplete your estates, to steal your energy, to steal your labor, to convert all inheritances to the United States Corporation Company, and thus to that corporate company owners, which would include all the members of the Roman Curia, which would include most of your big time priests right on up to the Pope of Rome. That's the fact. Collectively, they comprise what you know as the U.S. And so you thought the U.S. was a country. U.S. is the operations of unum sanctum, i.e., the Curia members of Rome with their corporate U.S., which you know as United States Corporation Company, which is a conglomeration of corporations, all coming under the auspices and the control of the crown, known as the attorneys, esquires, lawyers, members of the British accredited registry known as the American Bar Association, California Bar Association, etc., etc., etc. And these are the den of thieves, Pharisees, and Sadducees who have been robbing humanity, who have been perpetrating the animal husbandry operations willingly and knowingly to the injury of humanity. However, again, I remind you that with the cognizance arising among the people, those operations are being interrupted. Trust that you're on the side of the interrupters, because they've been interrupting the peace on the earth. They've been interrupting the prosperity of humanity. They've been interrupting the divinity of humanity. They've been interrupting the spiritual development of humanity. They've been interrupting the erudition of human knowledge, etc. And now it's being turned around because the people are beginning to recognize that these people have not been your government, they've been your enemy. And they've been converting your states to their own political platforms and in-legacy operations. And it's time for you to make sincere reversion of estates. That's a fact. And remember, as we had said to you before, and this is again why every once in a while we go into the treaty book and read that letter to the Secretary of State, demonstrating the fact that they would not go into detail in those lines on how the Moors lost their nationality, and they're making reference to the naturalization, and of course that 14th Amendment, etc. And you know that all of these people that's been following these so-called black leaders claiming nationhood, they don't have a nationality card, and they've been telling the people also that their driver's license were ID, etc., knowing that these were bottomry instruments issued on the stock market. And they thought they was just giving you permission to exercise a right that already belonged to you divinely, that was interrupted and stolen. And that's again why it's so important for the people to do research and study and recognize that many of these institutions that they assumed were lawful, they were legally instituted, but not lawfully instituted, and that they were actually designed to injure you. However, again, all of these instrumentalities that they had created are actually destroying civilization. And so the people are being forced to actually address some of this stuff. We're just trying to encourage you to address these things with knowledge and not with emotion, and with intelligence and not with what you call violence. Use your intelligence. You don't need to be violent. Use your intelligence. Because remember, the only reason why vampires are successful, is that why vampires, like they'll show you movies and you'll see vampires will suck on people's neck while they're asleep. Why? Because they need you to be docile. Because if you're moving around, they can't sit too well. And same way with people being conscious. They can't. It's hard to enslave an intelligent a being that uses their intelligence. They're unsettled. So they need you to be docile. And so this is why the animal husbandry was inculcated. And for those of you who have read the philosophy page of the General Education Board, you can see they bluntly say that the people submit themselves with docility to their molding hands. And that's what they have done.
But not to mention the fluoride in the water, the chemtrails in the air, and whatever the GMOs of the food.
Yeah, the fluoride affects the sperm count in males, and also makes people docile. And it's a poison. That's why they put it in toothpaste, so people give themselves a regular dose. And that's also why they're being sued in world court.
Here's a question I wanted to bring up, since it says my granddaughter is delivering her baby tonight or tomorrow, does she have to sign a birth certificate? She's in a hospital, not a home birth.
No, make a birth record, put it in your Bible, your Quran, or your Torah.
But when they come around to
tell them that you will not stand as surety. Go. Do you have the flash drive? If you have access to the reversion or statement that we talked about a couple of sessions ago, use that statement
for birth.
Yeah, whenever you're dealing with them, That reversion or statement is a general statement in all your affairs of contractual affairs with them. Because keep in mind, when you look at the Christian Black Codes, I think it's Article 6. You will see in the Christian Black Codes that the church and the state work together and determine the destiny of your children. And that's the truth. That's why they come around with that bond. Because as soon as they get that bond, it goes right to 55 Water Street. And this is why you can see the medical facilities growing, because they're doing human trafficking. Because every time a child is born, they make a claim on it. That's why they'll take, because the child can't sign, they'll take the child's foot, which means the foundation footing, and actually put ink on it and stamp the child's foot on that bank bond, saying that the child signed it, and saying that the mother transferred, and as an informer transferred the child's estate to them. That's why they put the child's footprint on it.
Which is something I found out recently. If a child can, before their age 18, you can actually go and correct that more easily. If you become adult, then you've accepted it. But before the age of 18, such as
Yeah, they call it accepting, or what you're saying, claiming executorship over your property.
Right.
You know, my position is, why do it in the first place?
Most people don't know.
Well, isn't it back to understand what nationalization is?
Absolutely.
You know, like we talk very often, Dr. Nail, we have not, as a grand body, really been teaching the people the depth and the breadth of what nationality imparts and national principles imparts. That's why Durali said, go back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers, because as soon as you'll see all these paradigms that we accepted as reality are actually slave codes that have been normalized in society, and we take them as being real and valid. That's what the problem is. And so they're saying that this is why they say we can consent, that we're slaves by consent, but it is not. They're being deceived on multiple levels. And of course, that goes back to the rule and the operations of animal husbandry and why it was instituted in the first instance, to make the people docile and acceptable of these adhesion contracts and transferring of their estate to the United States Corporation Company. And this, when we tell people to read House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress, because if you read into the context of what Tropicon was saying on the floor of the House, that's an admission of what they were doing. And of course, a couple of years later, that they murdered him.
They killed him, yeah.
And said that his tractor turned over on him on his farm. No, that's not true. That's their cover-up. And almost anybody that really went against the priesthood and the bar or the crown, end up being suicided. And of course, as things are coming out, you hear a lot of people talking about the different people who were dealing with these political heads that they start listing names, and you see how many people were so-called suicided. Mm-hmm. And it is being more and more open is that people are becoming more and more conscious that these people are not who you thought they were.
That's interesting, because I was listening to, somebody sent me a video of Mark Christopher, and he did a video just, I guess, recently, talking about the fictions, some of the names that we think have been, yes, that they killed the fiction. Like
they would be called the Enzleggers.
He's talking about, he gave JFK, Nelson Mandela, and he was saying that on those, what we've never really seen the real, whoever those and even Martin Luther King, because his name was Martin. His name was
Michael
anyway.
Yes, Michael, yes.
Yeah, but he was telling that, and he says that the fictions were killed,
Yes.
but not the
beings.
Not the beings.
Yes. Yes.
So we've been,
and then
and he talked about the stage, that it's all a stage.
And then when you get into
it's theatrics, I think.
You start learning about the 1920s and 1930s and cloning. So all of that is fictions, in a sense, if you get the point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the transhumanism programming with the Frederick T. Gates. Remember Frederick T. Gates and
his son Bill.
Yeah. Now you look at the new Gates having patents in both biological operations and in descendancy with human transhumanism,
and
dealing with graphene oxide and other things being put into humans to make them transmittable, etc. Just like they have those cards that with the black strip where you have information that's transferred to supercomputers that people use every day with credit cards, everything, and never stop and think that those cards are counting and actually recording your activities and your transactions. And if they put it in your bloodstream, which is why a lot of people that get the jab, remember I showed you the pictures where the magnets stick on them, because that's transhumanism. That's part of the programming, so they can shut the people down. But again, people are starting to get conscious. And like we said years ago, we can't stop the bloodshed. What we can do is try to do the best we can is limit it. And see, Rome can only go so far as the people continue to be docile. People stop being docile, the vampire can't suck. That's why a lot of people around us or that used to be friendly with us ain't friendly anymore, because many of them who are one-trick ponies have been in this movement just for the finance. And as the people become more and more conscious, these people are being exposed. So they're uncomfortable too, because they, had a nice little ride at the expense of the people. Well, all that shit's going to end.
So I'm just going to say this right now while you're talking. Some people are asking how they can obtain the flash drive. So I just had it up, but I'm just going to put it up right now for anybody who's asking about how to obtain a flash drive. Here's how you obtain it. If you look at what the banner that's running under the bottom, you'll see that right now. And make note of that number, text USB to that number, and you'll get the link to purchase.
Just think like this, Dr. G. Think of our conversation, say 7-10 years ago. Things that we were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are things that are going on right now. And for those of you who look back at some of the old videos, etc., you'll see that much of the stuff that you're experiencing now, we warned you of years ago, actually. But a lot of times, I think sometimes people get angry at you if you have a little bit of insight. They don't like you to be able to, to say what you see.
Mm-hmm.
When they start making negative statements, and then what you've said years ago turns out to be true, they get angrier because they're being exposed for being part of the system.
You've said a lot of things over the 11 years that I've known you and worked with you, so that have come to pass. And I could be honest and say that some of the things, they went over my head, or I was like, yeah, right. You know what I mean? And they seemed a little far-fetched, but I can honestly say that I've seen most, if almost not all of what you've said. Not all, because we haven't gotten to all.
Because we're in the experience.
We're in the midst of it. Yeah. And I know you said it years ago. and you probably said it years before I heard you say it, but you and I go back 11 years.
Mhm.
So yes, I do know that even things that we have been trained to
Yes.
believe
Yes.
and to see things in a theatrical sense, and
Yes.
it's not reality.
Right.
That's
That's the animal husbandry training. And this is where they did the experiment with animals, and they recognized that when you torture or stress beings and then start giving them suggestive or psychic attacks, or what you call telling them what their visions are, as opposed to them dealing with their own intuitive mind vision, they start letting them tell them what the vision is. And this is part of the animal husbandry training. And so therefore people go into states of mental denial from stress, from torture, different ways of torturing people, economic torture, just like they talk about in King Alfred, where they talk about doing encroaching on the people's rights, and little by little, by economic torture or subterfuge, that they would force the people to be subdued.
when you talked about the vision and telling you, that's what lie vision.
Television was actually set up for mind control.
They started with radio.
Yep.
And they saw how well radio worked, and so now they're like, how much more can we get done if we give them a visual, an actual visual, because of what you see,
and then
you recreate
the actors and the acting.
Absolutely. And then they told us in the movie The Truman Show.
Yeah, true man.
True man.
True man being suppressed. Even like an executive, executive order 11490, when they talk about consent, the primary victory. Now, here's diversion summary, right? Media keep the adult public attention diverted away from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Schools keep the young public ignorant of real mathematics, real economics, real law, and real history. Entertainment keep the public entertainment below a sixth grade level. Work keep the public busy, 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 with no time to think back on the farm with the other animals. Animal husbandry, that's what it is. Consent, the primary victory. A silent weapon system operates upon data obtained from a docile public by legal but not always lawful force. Much information is made available to silent weapon systems programmers through the Internal Revenue Service. See studies in the structure of the American economy for an IRS source list. This information consists of the enforced delivery of well-organized data obtained in federal and state tax forms collected, assembled, and submitted by slave labor, provided by taxpayers and employers. Furthermore, the number of such forms submitted to the IRS is a useful indicator for public consent, an important factor in strategic decision making. Other data sources are given in the short list of inputs. Consent coefficients, numerical feedback indicating victory, status, psychological basis. When the government is able to collect tax and seize property, private property, without just compensation, it is an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and is consenting to enslavement and legal encroachment. A good and easily quantified indicator of harvest time is the number of public citizens who pay income tax despite an obvious lack of reciprocal or honest service. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
When they're talking among each other, they consistently refer to what? To these people as no different than animals on the field. Why? Because they've been trained under animal husbandry. But being conscious of much of their operation gives you the advantage of recalibrating your thinking, redirecting your energies, removing yourself from many of their institutional operations, and thus beginning to constrict the blood flow to the vampires and exploiters. Because their system lives because they're sucking your blood. They are blood suckers. They're absolute parasites, which we've been telling you for years.
Yeah, well, that's what politics are, many bloodsuckers.
Yep, they're ticks.
Ticks.
They're ticks.
Yeah, so absolutely.
And poly means
Many.
public. Public, yeah, that's what poly means, public. Yeah, ticks. Ticks on the public.
There's been like a bunch of questions about Barbados. I don't know if you know anything about Barbados and what's going on, but
well,
I don't know.
I can't know until you give me the question.
Any thoughts? Speak. They're saying speak on Barbados. I don't know what they want you to speak.
Speak on Barbados relative to what?
I don't know.
Relative to the jurisdictional operations or territorial?
I don't know.
Or the issue that Queens is being removed as the sovereign?
Maybe that was that. I think maybe
that's because back to the consciousness that we're talking about, the
becoming a republic.
The animal husbandry operations of the U.S. is being dismantled, being interrupted. Therefore, if you're making reference to the sovereignty of Barbados, as well as let me see, Hawaii and other political jurisdictions, that's because they're dismantling and removing the members of the Bar Association in relationship to their bottomry instruments, and therefore removing the Queen of England and the operatives of the Crown, which is not just the Queen of England, but also the bar members, from jurisdictional powers over their divine sovereign birthright. And so thus the Queen is being removed as a sovereign. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's about becoming a republic. So I don't know.
If they then we say now. When we said 4 years ago, Dr. Naila, and you've seen even some Moors who have been around us that have been severely criticizing me for promoting Noble Ali's statement of enforcing the Constitution and using every kind of method they can to tell the people that the Constitution has no relationship to them. And I keep saying it's the spirit behind it. Mm-hmm. That comes from Honesty Confederation. It is because what's happening now is that the whole world, remember I said that the whole world been watching us?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what the world's doing? They're studying the organic, original Constitution for the United States of America, the ancient spirit in it that deals with human allodial principles. And guess what? The nations of the earth are adopting the Moorish Divine and National Movement program for uplifting fallen humanity, and they're rejecting Rome. Thus, the social or the political reflection of that would be getting rid of the democracy, the demon platform, and restoring the principle of republic. That's what you see happening, and you're going to see more and more of it taking place around the planet. And so all of your good buddies around you who've been saying that Noble Ali didn't know what he was doing, setting up government, and them people around you have been trying to discredit Noble Ali, are eating pie. You know what I'm saying? And sooner than later, they're going to have to admit, although many of their egos won't allow it, that they were wrong. And it doesn't matter whether they admit it or not, because the deal of it is the people are going to come at them when they start seeing who they were really working for in the background, particularly when they spent so many years supporting some of these people economically, and they find out the parasites that they are and were all the time. Because remember, half of them, a lot of people just came onto this movement. You ever notice how, like, over the years, Dr. G, a lot of people came into the platform pretending that they were supporting the principle of uplifting fallen humanity. And as soon as they got a little bit of power, they started fleecing the people.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I've seen a few in my short
Yeah,
period.
that stuff ain't worked too good for them now, is it? It's starting to wane off, isn't it? As people are becoming conscious, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true.
And then you see all of a sudden, a lot of them who were actually under, you know how you say, in the background, not supporting Noble Ali, are more and more coming out openly and admitting that they didn't support Noble Ali, aren't they? Haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
Either directly or indirectly, they're showing their colors, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Now, guess what? Remember I said a couple of years ago, I said Trump is assigned.
Yeah, people said that often.
Assigned does not mean I'm supporting it. Assigned mean that the chess moves that they've been making against us are being turned on them, and they're making them against each other. And what they're doing is that they're buying, what they're trying to do is convince the people that some of them are finally going to be fair to the people. No, they're not. They're still battling over our estate.
True.
But it gives you an opportunity to see them because they're exposing themselves. You ever notice how some people among ourselves saying don't criticize them because they're protecting us? Mm-hmm. Show the history at any time, any generation where the United States government has protected our people from the cruelties and abuses that's been having hoisted upon our people.
They can't because they're the perpetrators.
Exactly. They can't and they won't because they're de facto. And so when you say de facto, people, you know how we say all the time, Dr. Naima, though we've been saying it for years, what you recognize is some people really still don't get what de facto means. De facto means imposter, fraud,
fake,
misrepresentation, fake, artificial, prima facie, etc. That's what it means. Artifice.
Healing Truth Center asked if you can elaborate on how Rome is not being reformed but interrupted, because Rome cannot be reformed, correct?
Back up again.
That Rome is not being reformed but interrupted. And then second part says because Rome cannot be reformed, correct?
Exactly. So now hold that thought. I'm gonna read one of my favorite chapters. Remember, I always read this every once in a while. Book of the East.
Mm-hmm. You show all these books and everybody wants them. You show these books, Sheik, I just want to tell you that everybody wants the books. You show.
You know what? We're going to get this together.
No, those are my copies. I've had for 11 years.
The Council of the Seven of the World. In every age since time began, but 7 sages lived. At first of every age, these sages meet to note the course of nations, people, tribes, and tongues, to note how far toward justice and love the race has gone, to formulate the code of law, religious postulates, and plans of rule best suited to the coming age. An age had passed, and lo, another age had come. The sages must convene. Now, Alexandria was the center of the world's best thought, and here in Philo's home the sages met. From China came Mengster, from India Vidyapati came, from Persia Caspar came, and from Assyria Ashbina came, from Greece Apollo came. Methano was the Egyptian sage, and Philo was the chief of Hebrew thought. The time was due. The council met and sat in silence in 7 days. And Mengster rose and said, "The wheel of time has turned once more. The race is on a higher plane of thought. The garments that our fathers wore have given out. The cherubim have woven a celestial cloth, have placed it in our hands, and we must make for men new garbs. The sons of men are looking up for greater light. No longer do they care for gods hewn out of wood. They seek for Allah not made of hands. They see the beams of the coming days and yet comprehend them not. The time is ripe, and we must fashion well these garments for the race. And let us make for men new garbs of justice, mercy, and love, that they may hide their nakedness when shines the light of coming days." And Vidyapati said, "Our priests have all gone mad. They saw a demon in the wilds, and at him cast their lamps, and they are broken up, and not a gleam of light has any priest for men. The night is dark. The heart of India calls for light. The priesthood cannot be reformed. It is already dead. Its greatest needs are graves and funeral chants. The new age calls for liberty, the kind that makes each man a priest, enables him to go alone and lay his offerings on the shrine of Allah." And Caspar said, "In Persia, people walk in fear. They do the good for fear to do the wrong. The devil is the greatest power in our land, and though a myth, he dandles on his knees, both youth and age. Our land is dark, and evil prospers in the dark. Fear rides on every passing breeze and lurks in every form of life. The fear of evil is a myth, is an illusion and a snare. But it will live until some mighty power shall come to raise the ethers to the plane of light. When this shall come to pass, the Magian land will glory in the light. The soul of Persia calls for light." You're right. The priesthood can't be reformed. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because the priesthood is the demons.
Rome is
the gem. Collectively, we refer to them as quote unquote Rome. And so when you see in the Quran, in the Bible, in the Torah, in any of the holy books, when it says render unto Caesar, what is Caesar's? Caesar symbolizes the rulers of Rome. And so the deal of it is, you either go or move towards justice, and as you can see, Jesus symbolizes justice. And it has nothing to do with whatever versions of religion people claim. Jesus symbolizes justice. You either move to the Christ degree or to the activation of the pineal gland, or you go to the lower self, i.e. Rome, No, the priesthood cannot be reformed because the priesthood is the bed and the bastion of the demons. They have deceived the whole world. Now they're being exposed. Thank you very much for recognizing that. But it's up to the people to start rejecting them. Keep in mind, they only got wealthy because the people kept feeding them. People keep believing in them. And the people keep losing, don't they? It's up to the people. They say they love Jesus, they love justice, they love Allah, they love Yahweh, they love parabombs. Well, now it's time to prove it. Because guess what? These demons is trying to take every damn thing from you and then trying to kill you off and trying to contaminate your bloodstream. Now, you want to keep cooperating with them? Keep making deals with the devil and see what happens. However, many of you are starting to wake up and starting to remove yourself from Rome and rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, i.e., that means leave Caesar alone. Stop dealing with Caesar. And that goes with all his minions, or what you call Roman Curia members. Those of you keep depending on them, going to find yourself deceived over and over again, and you're going to lose everything you got. The choice is yours. We're just sharing a rational opinion about it.
Here's a question. Ask if you've heard of the SF 181 race and ethnicity form.
Explain.
It's a form. I don't know what they want. You could have heard of it, but I don't know what their question is. Yeah. I mean, it's a form that the facto government has. So.
Because remember what we've always said the race paradigm is a false paradigm to cover up birthright theft. It's the artificial caste system that was created in order to divide humanity against themselves. It's called schismata, or divide and conquer. In military terms, they refer to it as schismata. It's an operative tool of social engineering.
Okay, here's a question.
That's why over the years you will see us say, when you look at the race paradigm that they're presenting, keep in mind race is the species. The species of the human race is expanded into families that you know as nations and nationalities. You know, it's referred to in the Bible, nations. They put nations against nations, etc. Mm-hmm. When you don't recognize your own nation or nationality, you lose your estate or your birthright. And this is again why what they refer to as their global initiative or their new world order or one world government, they want to bring you under the auspices of the Queen and Illuminati under Rome, and Rome would rule. And this is why they're killing nations. This is why whenever you speak anything about divine sovereignty, they get very, very hostile, extremely hostile. Anything that deals with divinity to them is hostility.
Here's a question. Can Taj recommend to us who have studied a few years any other Moorish scholars, be it historical sciences, biology, any other subject?
On kind of, it's not totally clear to me.
I don't know whether they're asking, do you study any, or they, when they said any other, so I'm guessing they putting you among them, and then is there any other that you recommend? Are there?
I would, if you would ask me as an example, but not limited to, I would suggest Nature Bey, Nika Bey, Asbury Park Temple. I would recommend Temple 43
in California.
Mm-hmm. There's a few other that I would consider, but I don't want to put myself out there on the diving board with some of these people. However, those two I would stand firm in. Also, Sheik Bey, and with the Moorish school for the children, but basically not too many that I would really put my neck out to recommend.
Well,
but those I do.
From a standpoint of ancient texts and so forth, stuff like works like the Popol Vuh or the various
Papal Vote, etc.
Yeah, those different.
Yes, things that would expose you to what's really going on. And one of the things that I see that I'm happy to see is that a lot of the hybrid European daughters and sons are starting to expose the truth too, just like Drew Ali said that they would. He said, I'm going to make the European tell you the truth. And as we told you years ago, as they start losing their estates, that they would start telling the truth, not necessarily because of some moral or ethical principle, but because they're losing their estates and they didn't expect to get thrown under the bus. So a lot of them are starting saying some of the things that we've been telling people for 40 years. They may use different words or they may use different angles to tell you the same thing, but the real deal is the restoration of your lost estate. They'll dance around the issue of nationality because they don't want to admit that many of them have been beneficiaries of robbing us. Because even a lot of them that are telling a lot of the political truths are still claiming to be us. Mm-hmm. You know, like the book of John says, they claim to be Abraham's children, but they haven't been doing the works of Abraham. John 8:44. Mm-hmm. Some who claim to be JUSWs and are not. JEWSs.
Yeah, where's a Matthew Burst has asked, can you talk on the dolarium and how we can implement it for use in the public or private use for commerce?
What it is the spirit behind it. It is essentially, and you got to look at a lot of these things as spiritual. By the standing up of true heirs, what it does, it kills the other frauds, because what they will try to do is try to allege that an instrumental claim coming from the true heirs is not valid, when the fact of the matter, what's been operating is a fraud. And by the heirs speaking up, because it's our estate, and really what that is a letter of credit against our state to the world. That's what the dollarium is, actually, and has more authority than all those instrumentalities that are out there. The deal of it is, by it being put out there, is what you call a spiritual challenge.
But this is just my question. Yeah. Does it, like anything else, does it need the backing of gold and silver?
No, the fungibility, because the real deal is the people of the gold and silver. And the real deal is, it is really where people are looking for what you call commercial trade in relationship to the dollarium, etc. in the world platform. The effect is not that immediately. The effect is what you call a countermeasure to the fraud that's out there. And by coming from who is coming from, the true heirs, it actually kills the bond system. It is actually a spiritual counter move. And I think a lot of times people don't understand the spirituality of things. They look at it only from a physical, materialistic platform or perspective, and they're expected an operative countermeasure to the fiat in its fungibility operations, and that's not altogether its purpose. Its purpose is a counterclaim, or what you call a reversion of a state, by right of claim of true heirs. And so what it does, it exposes the existing system of operations of fiat frauds. And in fact, by doing so, it actually collapses the bond system of the human trafficking. Although on the surface, you wouldn't see it that way. But those who have eyes to see recognize it for the spiritual value it actually has. And that's the truth. And so what you're really going through is an experience of observing the dismantling of the gin operations and the demon platform of the United States Corporation Company, uh, and heirs becoming more and more conscious of their responsibilities to them, to ourselves, etc., and doing or exercising such operations or activities that demonstrate our knowledge of that right and that obligation. And in doing so, we're dismantling the system, because the actuality of it is that the land and the resources are ours by birthright, and any instrumentality is only in place for transferring or vouchering into those goods and services, etc. And of course, you're looking for the fungibility factor, which I comprehend. However, the actual issue is actually it's a spiritual blow against the demon operations. That's a fact. Now, one of the other things that we're looking at relative to the operations of the animal husbandry training, um, look at how they look at energy, and keep in mind, um, the issue of their operations is to capture energy, all energy sources, control them, and then do the dog constriction trainings that they did in those tests in the 30s, etc., in the 40s, dealing with programming humans, etc., by torture methods and starvation, then overfeeding, then starvation, and then also using chemicals to cause obesity and diseases among the people, etc. They have literally laboratories that they would use to deal with tastes, um, mental response, extraction, and um, activating the dopamine in the brain, dealing with chemicals, which is why they use the different chemicals in the foods, etc., poisoning the people to cause other sickness that comes from those tests they did with animals, with rats and dogs, etc., and converted them into programs to apply to humans. And this is again why certain communities, and I don't have to tell you who those communities are, you already know, have been targeted for certain foods, etc., junk foods, etc., to create sicknesses, etc. 90% of all sicknesses are created but don't exist in nature. That's a fact.
And when they start, excuse me, y'all, I had to choking, but when they start making potato chips and things like that, specific hood chips and stuff with that they're putting in, melanated communities and things like that, products specifically, I would be so leery,
Those were designed.
so leery of that stuff. If it,
They were designed.
absolutely. Here's a question from Andre Renard of Maxim Bay. If the letter from the hybrid Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama is valid, why isn't that the vampires taking actions to it?
What you see in your politics going on, you will see that those actions or those countermeasures, and even though a lot of it is a front, from my opinion, if you get the point, you will see the battle that you see taking place with Donald Trump, and the military who assigned him to dismantle the the democratic platform that was set up with the Organic Act of Congress 1871. And if you look at the theatrics that they're doing, and a lot of it is theatrics, you'll see that battle going on under, whether it's pretext or actual. You'll see those very things that were being addressed with Nasara and Gisara being played out, in relationship to Donald Trump, etc., and also the Q operations that was set up since the Abraham Lincoln administration. And so, a lot of people, as I mentioned to you all before, a lot of people think that the Q operations originated with the military and Donald Trump, when actually it originated during the Lincoln administration. And so what you're making reference to is playing out before the public, before your eyes right now.
So they've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes for many years that have not been successful, or had to, in some cases, had to take time.
Yeah, even when you see, the for those who are in who are domiciling in the area of Virginia and Maryland, in the Alexandria area, you'll notice that the military operations there and the fences around the Congress and the White House, etc., at that area. That's part of those both the motu proprio statements made via the Pope of Rome in 2013, and also the civil orders 2014 and made public 2015, which you're making reference to. That's not a support. It's just to give you something to look at, to observe. And like I've always said for the last few years, Donald Trump is assigned. He's only a front for other operations that are happening behind via the military. For a few in the military, because remember they're schism too, who are trying to restore the republic order that was in place prior to the assassination of Lincoln. And so you see them battling for who's going to retain power, whether the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Illuminati and the Bar Association, which it consists of the Crown of the Circle Church and Chancery on Fleet Street, England, and the House of Windsor and the Pope of Rome are going to be able to sustain their seat for the Roman goddess at Washington, or if it will be dismantled. That's what's going on. That is back to civil orders that you're making reference to.
Here's a question: Can we use the Inter-American Declaration for Indigenous People, or is that de facto?
My position would be principle is always valid. You don't have to have an instrumentality coming from any other source. It can come from yourself, as long as those principles are in the positive, for the restoration of the right of a state.
So is that yes?
Well, concept, yes.
Yeah.
Concept, yes.
They can use it.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a difference between Moor and Moorish American?
Moorish American and Moor, basically, no. Basically, what you're dealing with when you're making Moorish American, you're talking about the true heirs of the North Gate. So if you're making reference to, because Moors are all over the planet. So when you're talking about the Canaanites, Moabites who made the great Super de Vere or crossed the river, or what we call the Ibri, and that's not the name of us. That is something that we did. Those who are also are the direct descendants of the ancient Moabites, who were given permission to domicile in this portion of Mexum in the west, or what is known as the Maghreb, are Moorish Americans by virtue of the political platform. But you are indeed Moors. That's just a political distinction.
Vanessa Robinson asked, a company, a contract would ask me to provide a W-9 as a national. What's the best remedy? They're asking for
anything that deals with the IRS is making a contract with Rome. That's a fact. Now, as far as the effectiveness to your satisfaction, one way or another, I will not argue that. The issue is you make a deal with Rome, you lose. And if you're convinced that you make a deal with Rome and you win, go ahead and try it. But I'm suggesting that we start rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And this is the question before all of you. Why is it that our people have more faith and trust in things that are produced by a known criminal organization under the Roman Curia of the Inquisition Revenue Services, known as the IRS, which is a bookkeeping accounting firm, private, foreign for profit, known for human trafficking, and known for violating constitution and treaty operations, etc. Why do you have more faith in accepting and signing contracts constructed by them under the Roman Curia members and have no faith in constructing your own? That's a curious question to you all.
Someone is asking if you can give them the name of the Moorish battle on Lake Michigan.
Battle of Lake Michigan with the Batam Ram.
Is that Putin Bay?
The Batam Ram. You talking about Chief Justice Moluakanio?
Was that in 1813?
No, or you talking about who they refer to? They refer to him also as Ben Banneker. That's another way of hiding some of the history, etc. But you're talking about the Batam Ram ship or the last of the Moorish Navy on battle on Lake Michigan, 1812. Battle of 1812. Last of the Moorish Navy.
There's something else they call the Battle of Lake Erie too that happened.
Yeah, it was on all the lakes.
Yeah.
Because remember, those were the major trade routes. Because remember, the hybrid Europeans in the mid 1800s, one of the keys, particularly after we lost here, then we lost Germany, etc. That's when they started altering the history or reconstructing history and claiming our states. This is why most of the people here aren't aware that most of the castles that you see in Iberia or Europe and in Germany, they were Moorish castles. They weren't the hybrid Europeans, they were yours. That's why it was important for them to reconstruct the history, and also, again, from a political motivation perspective, for them to set up animal husbandry training with the General Education Board to rewrite history and to write themselves in and to write you out. This is why it's so important also for them on their part of operations to have what they call the mummers operations at Philadelphia, with the rituals, the yearly rituals on January the 1st, celebrating the fall of the Red House, which was January the 1st. And also altering the psyche of what you call your chronology. And so this is also why they alter the calendars, so to set us off. It's why when you look at the treaties, the signing of the treaties, and you're looking at the dates on a Gregorian calendar, etc., what they call the Christian calendar year, they're not harmonic. That's why in the treaty book, we note to the people as an example. Let me make this notice to you. Like in the treaty book as an example, right? And we talk about the signing of the treaties. So you look at the treaty 1786, 1787, right? And of course, it's superseded by the treaty of 1836. When you look at the signing of the treaty, you see 1200.
So
you got they mess with the calendars.
1786.
The correlation of time. So once you're aware of the calendar systems, etc., you're able to do a mathematical adjustment, and all, but you need to recognize their motives, and that's my point made to you. Even the fact that many of them, like as an example, the schools will not teach people that the minister's plenipotentiary, who was Jefferson, um, Ben Franklin, etc., that they were ministers plenipotentiary during the construction of the treaties.
What does that mean?
That most potent power. They were assigned to do treaty with the empire for Britain, i.e., for the Europeans, etc., to do business at North America. And Thomas Barclay as agent in business, etc. That's why they don't teach the treaty, the history of the treaty, etc., superseding the Constitution. They don't want the people to know the real history here. And even your so-called black scholars, you'll see them stay away from that information, because remember, their job is to promote the black codes. So they keep telling people that that black is African identity, when they know that it is a tag that socially, politically, by animal husbandry, engineering of caste, means political death. It has nothing to do with color, it means political death. It's a social engineering caste system, not an identity. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why we did the treaty book to tie it together, so people start making those correlations themselves. Because our people are influenced by a lot of people among our own that are heavily influential. And so when they keep telling you that black means African, you believe them, because they give you a lot of Egyptian history and stuff, and they'll tell you about the great pyramids and the great things that were built, etc. And we were here before Columbus, and then turn around and call the people black when they know that they were Moors. Absolutely. But the people don't know that the black codes were put in place to disenfranchise you from your estates. See, because if they get you to agree that you're black, you're not part of the human family. So you can't argue human rights when you're claiming that part of the human family is black monkeys. Because Negro means monkey, or a thing, not a living being. And they know that too. But they know that under animal husbandry, our people have been trained that black means African bloodline. It does not. It means political death. It's a social engineering, not an etymological uh, denotation. It is a social political engineering connotation dealing with political death, social status. That's a fact. And when we read and it shows you, Dr. Naila, how poignant it is, and we've done it often when we read that letter to the Secretary of State, Secretary Root. That's 1906. In relationship to nationality, and logically, the status of the people changed when they agreed to be U.S. citizens. They're dead politically at that point.
Like people are dead and long, too.
You know, and you notice how they didn't want to go into details in those matters. Why? Because that's their political foundation of economic operations, by bonding the people. This is why they call the 14th Amendment person the straw man, the man of straw. Transmitting utility. What is a transmitting utility? It is a voucher system of trade, i.e., on the bonds that's put on humans and sold from Water Street. And this is why they say that the debt belongs to the people when actually the debt belongs to them. It's called conversion of a state. Our activity in declaring your nationality is reversion of your estate. which is, we mention it so many years over and over again. More and more people are beginning to comprehend what that means, and so this is helping humanity ascend a little bit. And so their animal husbandry is being interrupted by the people's comments. And hopefully we've done something to help along the way. But this remembers everybody's job. Everybody's job. Because every man, woman, and child must confess their own. And I think a lot of times people are still looking for that sacrificial lamb type thing where they're looking for someone else to confess their responsibility. But we have to get out of this whole psychology of someone else confessing our responsibility. It is yours to confess, or what you say, proclaim. Now, as an example, when Obama mentioned the Treaty of Tripoli as an example, when Obama mentioned the Treaty of Tripoli, I'm gonna give you an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when Obama mentioned the treaty? And many of you can go on your internet now and look at Barack H. Obama and his statements about the Moors and the treaties, and you'll see some of this stuff. You'll put it in perspective once you comprehend what we've been telling you for years. Now, signed and sealed at Tripoli of Barbary, the third day of Jamad in the year of the Hagira 1211, corresponding with the day of November 1796. So take 1211 and 1796, and you can see that they have played you. So that,
how did that come up?
there you go.
So the dates are.
So you're looking. So now, when you're going into history, and you're measuring by the Gregorian calendar, this is another reason why people are disconnected from their Moorish history. Because number one, they don't know the real politics here, and this is foundational politics here at North America of government. And yet, why is it not taught? It's not taught because they're writing you out of history. They put you under the black codes, and they paid people among your own to keep promoting black and Negro paradigm when actually you're Moors. And so you mentally are disassociated with the land and the politics and the reality of the treaties and the Constitution for the United States, having no recognition that actually all that comes from your forefathers, and therefore consenting to giving up your birthright to these foreign demons and jinn who have been pretending to be government, and they have done it quite successfully. And that's what the Organic Act of Congress 1871 is all about. And moving the government from the Phoenician city, Philadelphia, to the Seven Hills of Rome, and took a portion of Maryland and a portion of Virginia, and so they call that Virgin Mary, and seat on the throne the Roman goddess Columbia, and they call it District of Columbia. And they've been ruling not only the heirs of the estate, but actually they have exported those operations around the world and subverted all republics. And back to the earlier statements about the Caribbeans, etc., Barbados and other Caribbean areas of Moors, they will all be moving toward restoration of the republic order. So for those others, when you look at the Carib Moors, think of Toussaint and go back in that history, and you'll know why they murdered him too. But what was he doing? Working to restore the republic. Yes.
It's been going on a long time.
You got that right. This battle is long. It's old. However, people are becoming conscious. And thus, the animal husbandry operations of the Unum Sanctum U.S. corporate Roman Curia members of the Bar Association of the British Accredited Registry is losing the faith of the people and thus losing power because it only has power because the people have faith in it.
You touched on this a little bit, but Gaither D asks, is there a timeline in play, or is time irrelevant to the process at this point? In short, will most of us see the transformation completed, or will the next
Yeah,
generation?
well, you're seeing it now because you are that generation. True. The fact. So let's look at it. Let's kind of look at it two ways. When you look at honestly things that are operating in what you would call higher dimensional form or high dimensional planes, etc., time, the way we look at linear, is not operative in that sense of the word. And so you got two things. You have the anxiety of your material third dimensional thoughts, constructs of what you call your calendar time. And then you have your dimensional layers, which has no time. They're layers, they're planes. So what you want to observe, I would say the best way to look at it is look in the heart of your intuitive mind and recognize your experience and get more in tune with that. And you'll see that you're actually operating in, it's sort of like, like say, how they say, make statements about can't see the forest for the trees. And a lot of criticisms that we took years ago, people are talking about commonly now. And if they go back to some of our old stuff, we've been telling these people this stuff for years. At that time, we were looked at as being out to lunch. And now a lot of the things that we were talking about, 30 years ago, people are talking about commonly now. So if you look at the records and some of the things that we've been saying, we've been telling this stuff for years. And so look at it this way. I think people who are closer to their intuitive mind saw these things anyway. And surprisingly, and I think I was never really frustrated by it, but I know as I was growing up, one of the things that bothered me, and one of the things, even some of the things that I started writing about in the early '80s, in the late '70s and the early '80s, I was myself coming out of my own denial because a lot of these things I saw even as a child. But if I talked about them, I started recognizing that people kind of looked at me funny, and so I suppressed it. And as I got older, I in my own way, I got less mentally vested in these things, and like I've said to some of you sometimes, after a while, I didn't give a damn, and I started saying what I saw. But it's not that I didn't see some things even earlier. And meaning that I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. I'm not trying to live up to anybody's image. I started saying what I say. And it is again why I even founded the roundtable, because as I belong to other different organizations, I started recognizing that same thing I did as a child. That when you say what you see, people get uncomfortable and they don't like you. And then you find yourself seeing things and suppressing things that you see, and that and you want to help your family, you want to help yourself, and you see stuff, and then you think that other people see it too, and when they don't, they get angry at you if you bring up some things, because a lot of times you can see things even with them. And I had to learn over the years that to shut my mouth sometimes. And then as I got older, I don't care. I say it, and so people don't like me. I don't care, and so I say it. But I as I got older and started examining us, I recognized that people do see stuff. They're afraid to talk, because they're not liked. They're more interested in people accepting them. And when you have insight, or if you're a little bit what people like call psychic or something like that, people get uncomfortable with you. They don't like you because they can't hide from you. Doesn't make you any better. Doesn't make you any in a sense it's no more perfect than them, because we all have our flaws. But people are uncomfortable with people who see. They really get alienated because they like to hide from you. And people with eyes, you can't hide. And it's just what it is. But as things pass, things are your experiences are catching up with you, and you can't deny it anymore. And I don't look at it from a point of vindication or anything like that. I just look at it from a point of curiosity and wonder what has taken a lot of these beings so long to admit what in their heart of hearts they knew all the time, and how we let all this mess get constructed around us that has injured all of us, when if we would have admitted what we've seen and started rejecting and started doing something about it, this stuff wouldn't be so bad. Now things are really rotten because we've ignored our responsibilities. And then many people who could see would not speak up because they feared not being liked, and that's just my honest opinion in those matters. It's not that this stuff wasn't seen. These people didn't have no guts to tell the truth, that's all, or will to tell the truth. And so when people see, it's not unusual. A lot of people see. A lot of people were more connected to their intuitive mind. They were just being suppressed at childhood. And that's the truth. But most of the stuff should have been seen by most people 34 years ago. Truthfully, to be honest with you.
I mean, the truth, you're right, but many of us were under that illusion and under that
That's
spell.
The denial. That's the denial.
Right, but it seemed like for me it was 2011, I guess it was at the end of 2010. I'm sorry, into 2010, but somewhere around that 2010 to 2012 period, a lot of people began to have these epiphanies, and like myself, and these wake ups, and all of a sudden the veil was dropped, the curtain, if you will. He said the veil in the Bible says the veil in the temple was rent, and they talked about the falling away. So I compared or likened it to that scripture, but not in a scriptural sense, that they were saying there's going to come a time but that they were already prophesying, if you will, or proselytizing, that they knew it was going to come a time when the illusion was going to be up. Exactly. People were going to see, and they called it a falling away, like it was religious, but it really was the fact that the illusion
of our evolution,
and it would lose its power.
Yes, the blind faith would die.
Yeah.
The blind faith is a tool of demons and jinn.
Yes.
That's why they're called, Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast, or the great deceiver. But the deal of it is what I recognize is that humans are able to see all the time if they were willing to. And I'm not knocking, because I know, as I was growing up, that I neglected my responsibilities. Although I was young, it's not that I couldn't see. Is that I started suppressing it because I noticed how people would respond to it. You understand? And it's just as I got older, I didn't give a damn because I lost so much. You know what I mean? Yeah. But we all have our experience. But I say this again, and I'll hold true to this to the very last breath. Humans are able to see. They've always been able to see. They've been in denial. And that denial has become the culture. And therefore, we've been subject to the jinn and the demons because we have been in denial of our own power. We start putting our faith in them and not in our own divine intuitive mind. We let them convince us that we were wrong for seeing. That's the truth. This is why a lot of times, Dr. Nail, times, it's not that I don't have patience, because I am patient in many ways. A lot of times when over the years when people ask me, show me this, show me that you see me reluctant, I'll tell them certain things and don't hold their hands because I already know they're able to see. They keep looking for somebody else to sacrifice for them. That's irresponsible and it's unfair. They have the same capacities. They're born with the same capacities. They choose to deal with the dogma systems rather than respect their divine mind. Respect your divine mind. Respect your intuit and use it. They let these politicians and preachers convince you to suppress your own intuitive mind. That's another major reason why we're in trouble. So we kind of earned this situation to a degree too. They not only abused us, but we gave up our birthright. Well, take it back.
So Wuhan Fishmonger asks, it says, Taj, my family is being destroyed.
Yes.
How do I wake them up?
Tell them the truth, but they still have to walk on their own. The interesting thing about these times and this energy, you know how, and like you always know, Dr. Naila, I'm not one to pump, the Bible type thing, but a lot of things in it is apropos. Every man, every woman, and every child must confess their own and worship under their own vine and fig tree. There will be no sacrificial lambs to carry your cross. You must carry your own cross, take your own responsibilities. And as the law is being enforced, it is this: ignorance of the law is no excuse. Because the truth is that the law is of self. It is I, self, law, and master. And the responsibility of humanity is to go back to their divine mind and use that divine mind to solve the problems at Midgard that has evolved to this detrimental level because all of us have been irresponsible and we keep looking for sacrificial lambs. Tell them the truth, and whosoever will hear it, and whosoever will not hear it because they will block their ears. And whosoever will, let them come, and whoever chooses not to, will not, because it's their choice to do. And don't ever think that they're incapable of comprehending, because they absolutely are. Because the energy is here now that all who want to see can see. If they choose not to see, they have a right to reap what they sow, just as we all have. That's the truth. So if your right arm offends you, don't feel bad about cutting it off. It's what it is. Hard but fair. And the real problem that we have is that while we've been playing around with these belief systems for all these generations, these demons have entrenched themselves in the political platform and are on a dedicated mission to kill humanity off. That's blunt truth to you. Deal with it. And they're in operation as we speak. And don't ever think that the jab that they're giving people has anything to do with life saving. It has absolutely the opposite. Part of the genocide program.
Here's a question. When claiming a state, is status an Englishman?
Say it again.
Someone's asking, when claiming a state, I guess they're asking, should they put the status as an Englishman?
An Anglo-man of the land or of...
It says English man.
I don't, it's not clear.
I don't see why one would say that.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about territorial jurisdiction, you're talking about pedigree jurisdiction, consanguinity jurisdiction, estate, right of estate jurisdiction. The implication I sense is one of a jurisdictional claim, but I'm not clear in the way that the question is structured.
So questions again are still coming about asking how to bypass the W-9 stipulation. I think you addressed that because either you're in or you're out of their system.
Anything that deals with the Inquisition Revenue Service. Remember, any instrumentality that you put your autograph to becomes a negotiable instrument in itself. Also, it is a sanctioning or an authorization for authority into your estate, which is absolutely the opposite of what I assume that you intend to do. My position with all of the U.S. corporate entity operations and legacy entities, by the way, all of whom are bankrupt and have no business being operative anyway, is more what you call in judicial notices of reclamation of estate in some way or form, not in some agreement that gives them jurisdiction in your estate. Any appeal or any application to them gives them what you would call judicial authority, or what you would call, it would be a transfer of power of attorney and a contract that would give them cause or what you call jurisdiction in your estate. Now that's a fact. And I say that that should be in your consideration with your question. And your determinations would be based on, you want to give them jurisdiction in your estate? Sure, start filling out stuff with them. If you want to reclaim your estate, put them on notice. And also put them on notice to send back all your stuff that they took previously via misrepresentation.
So the bypass would be to put them on notice.
Yes, that would be proper, to put them on notice.
And they're probably going to ask you, how does one do that? Well,
common sense. How put it this way. How does one give someone power of attorney? By signing them instruments.
Yeah.
How does someone not give them power of attorney? By not doing it.
Well, would the
also,
reversion don't work with that?
That's what a reversion of a state is.
I think, though, Grand Sheik, though, till today, I thought, and maybe others thought, that the reversion was only in terms of mortgages, but you're saying anything.
That is anything.
And I think it was always given in the context of mortgages.
Because we were talking about specific questions that people were asking, and we were saying in general. Remember, those of you, I don't have my computer up here right now, so I'm not reading that. But if you have that computer on your drive, read the statement of the reversion of estate, and it's very clear. You're dealing with the United States, which is really unum sanctum, and its affiliates and associates, and that you do not stand as surety for them at any point of time. That is a general reversion of estate claim, and so that would include IRS, Senate, congressmen, the fake governors, the council people, the IRS, the IMF, the banksters, the priesthood, all of them are Curia members. You're rebutting all Curia member operations or claims in your heritabilities. Because remember, all of the ens legis operations or straw constructs, whether all caps or otherwise, are designed for reversion or conversion of your estates. And when you look at the letter from Pope Francis to Obama, He's saying exactly that all of these fictional entities are returned to the people, to the rightful heirs, the geographical, that means the territory, the terror, which means the earth people. All of their estates are being returned, and that these people, these agencies, all who have been imitating or feigning as government, etc., all estates must be returned to the rightful heirs. That's a reversion of a state. And so our communications should be in that state of mind, not trying to dig deeper into the hole that we're getting out of. And I know it, it's sort of like, when you think about it, Dr. Nayela, it's how we can think about going into something and they can't figure out how going out of something. Like this is going to be complicated. But we go get forms and everything and fill out forms to go into this stuff and never dawn on us the reverse. We're not even groomed to the reverse. You see that mental, that Stockholm syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
That we need to ask someone how to undo something that we're doing when the issue is don't do it. And we can't even think that it's almost like sheep are walking off the cliff and saying, well, how do we not walk off the cliff while they're walking towards the cliff? Stop walking towards the cliff. Yeah, but we're supposed to walk toward the cliff. That's your training. That's the animal husbandry training. That's why we're making you aware of the mental psychic attacks that all of us have been operating under. We've been operating under animal husbandry thought processes.
Here's a question. Can you speak on from Amara on the CEO stepping down since the what's her name, Ghislaine case started, the trial started?
This is because this is back to the civil orders with Pope Francis and the motu proprio, which was issued in 2013. And of course, as a couple of the listeners had made statements here or there in relationship to them, i.e., talking about different people or CEOs or people owning some of these corporate operations or being heads of some of these corporate operations, not honoring the authority of the very Pope, who is their father, etc., of this world, etc., and been breaching. Not only have they been breaching all constitutions and treaties, they've been actually breaching the authority of the popes of Rome, which we talked about a few years ago, relative to people saying, well, how come they don't recognize the Moorish nationality card, different things like that. They're in breach. And the people keep looking for, oh, we got to do something differently. No, you're not wrong. Don't confuse your right of claim as being wrong just because they're dishonorable. So what you have is, as we've told you 6-7 years ago, that the nations of the earth would stop trading with the U.S. corporation and that you would have a feedback loop. Hadn't we been talking about that 7 years or more?
Yeah, but
so what the feedback loop, they stopped.
But aren't these? But because it's tied to the trial, is it possible that they were involved?
The trial. Can I say this honestly? The trial is a farcical show that exposes deeper
connections,
darker corruption far beyond what you're assuming on the surface. It indeed deals with world governments, world trade routes, dismantling of established institutions, dismantling of most of the governments on the planet, not just some people who are pedophiles and have been doing child sacrifice, doing things to children that aren't good, and drinking things that come out of children's bodies that's not good, and doing harmful things to children systematically for generations, and feeding carcasses back to the people through burger joints all over the land to contaminate humanity, and to justify their karmic response, etc., what you see is the dismantling of the Roman Curia platforms, which are known as the corporate entities, all of which come under the Circle Church and Chancery, and the Pope of Rome owns all U.S. corporations, LLCs, profit and non-profit. Anything that's assigned to them through them comes under the Roman Curia and the Popes of Rome. That the world is starting to turn on them in order to make a show, because it ain't all sincere. They're stepping down. Stepping down means transfer, they're being removed, or some physically eliminated. That's the truth. Like we say, people say, well, when is this or that's going to happen? It's going on while we're talking. And as a matter of fact, it's been going on for a while. It's just that it's been hidden from the public. Remember years ago when we said, Dr. Naila, I think in 2011, 2012, and I started mentioning to people, and I said, there's a civil war going on. I said, but it's beneath the surface. Pretty soon it's going to come to the surface where it can't be denied. Is what you say. It's part of it. But what they're trying to do intelligently is limit the bloodshed. That's really what's going on. And that's the truth. They're being dismantled. So all of these people that you see who are so-called CEOs and heads of these different corporations, most of them are Roman Curia members who have been assigned to these posts. Those corporate entities don't necessarily belong to them. They've been credited for things that they individually necessarily did not construct. It was actually constructed at the cost of the tithing stolen from the people by people that you thought was your government, with their experiments in animal husbandry and human trafficking. And they constructed these agencies and corporations to cover up the theft of the people's estates, etc. And so you look at these different men that all of a sudden made these different inventions and stuff like that. Well, no, all of those were done in your called intelligentsia of the scientists, biologists, war machines, etc. And so whether you're dealing with your media, which is the General Education Board operations, etc., including your newspapers. Because remember, as we talked about this stuff, we even talked about Horace Greeley and the Whittemore Party, all that's still connected. They're controlling the narrative, etc. All of those are military operations. So when they look at the bishopric, they're thinking of a priesthood who's serving God. No, there's government ordinance departments. There's the army of the Pope of Rome. That's the truth. And the deal of it is, the world is turning on them. The world is no longer buying U.S. Treasury bonds. The U.S. corporate Curia members are fighting back in different manners that they can. And so what you have is a constipation in the world trade systems, artificially and politically constructed. That's a fact. Meanwhile, they're going to try to kill off as many people as they can before the people figure out what they're doing to them, and that the enemy is not outside, the enemy is in your gates. And the enemy is who you thought was government. And you're not, collectively, the people haven't woken up to that yet, but they're on their way. So they need new variations of the kill off, and they're going to keep on coming up with new variations and versions of the ongoing biological war against the people, which is only an aspect of their war operations. Not the spearhead. It's just the one that's in the public view. So, as these people are being set down, or you say they're stepping down, know that they're not stepping down, they're being removed.
Who's removing them? Who's removing them? Who's removing them?
Essentially, to be blunt, U.S. military, United States Corporation Company has been dissolved. It is bankrupt. You all can look into the Hall of Records and see that the United States Corporation Company is bankrupt. It is being dissolved, but they continue to operate. That is the breach, a continued breach of operations that you see. And then you see this dog and pony show with operatives claiming to hold offices when the offices don't exist. However, they're still operating to fool the people, and they're still trying to get the people to assign things to them, like do some applications with the IRS for full faith and credit through the Bar Association, etc., to give them life again. Let them die. Take responsibility. Come together. Support each other. Put stuff to try to preserve yourself, because this attack is going to come more and more open. And many people, like we've been telling people for years, not going to survive this thing.
You got to do stuff physically to support, build your immune system, build up your food stockpile, your water stockpile.
Your greatest thing is take care of your own health.
That's right.
If you go to them, understand that you're not taking care of your health, because they're pathologists.
That's why we got Dr. Botanica, Brother Dave.
Yes, there you go.
So, but we are at the end of our 259. I just want to say something before you do the close. I just want to say this. This is just an announcement, because some of you heard me a few weeks ago talking about the AO scan energy scanner. I'm going to put that up just for a minute before you close out, Grand Sheik. If you heard anything about the AO scan, you're interested in the AO scan, you looked into it, there is a special going on to the end of this month, and the annual membership, Grand Sheik, that's normally $49 for your membership that you have to get first, is 50 cents. So it's 50 cents until December 31st. So that announcement, if you're interested, you can either visit what you see going across the screen, or you can text AO scan to that number. I will send you a link, but right now the $49 annual membership is only 50 cents. And I think those who really wanted it, even that may have made, that $48 in some sense change may have made a difference for someone. And thank you to those who have purchased theirs already, because a few got them since I've talked about it. And it's stuff like that we need, to assist in our personal education about our healing. Energetically, yes.
And you know what my intuit is on that, Doctor? Because it's really ancient technology, truthfully.
Yeah.
Things like that are really part of what's being little bit reintroduced in society that had been suppressed under the Indexus Librorum Prohibitorum and Expurgatorius, that's being reintroduced. This is where the tide is changing, where the ascension of humanity in the cognates, etc., by nature can't be stopped. Meaning that the political artificial constructs and legacy institutions that have been put in place under animal husbandry that has stagnated humanity for these generations itself is dying. Not necessarily because all of a sudden you got a bunch of moral and ethical compassion from people who all of a sudden out of guilty consciences trying to do something good. No. It's out of their hands, and they can't stop it.
Some things happen in cycles, and you can't stop the cycle.
That's exactly it.
And so we are in the wheel is turning in that direction.
An ascension paradigm.
Absolutely.
In truth.
And I only, like I said, I threw that in for two reasons. One, because you talk about the importance in this time of, of our health. So what better thing to have than something that's going to educate you about your body, your children, your family members, your loved ones, whatever, and then do something about it after it helps you do something about it educationally. And only in extreme cases would you have to end up going to anyone outside of a Dr. Botanica or a Brother Dave, because there's, something that you can do.
And they were put in place divinely
right
for what they do. Even when you look at the history of the U.S. corporation agencies killing off homeopathic doctors.
Oh, yeah.
And making it seem like something else. The world knows that this is what they've been doing. But people have been in denial. But as the people are ascending, what happens? The flowering of the mind of people who have been here to help people are more able to come out. Because Absolutely. It's the people's dying blind faith that actually is causing much of the healing and those truths to come out. And so a lot of these things that people think is new tech, it's not new tech.
No, it's old.
It's ancient stuff already known but suppressed that's coming out. And as it rolls out, these other platforms must come down. That's what it is. So the walls of Jericho is coming down.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the truth.
Absolutely. All right. So we thank you. We thank you for your support. We thank you for logging in. We thank you for bearing with us when we had our little blackout. Thank you for those who stayed on the line and didn't log off. And we think, I know people thought it was a something else, but I think the computer unhooked, and I thought it was
right.
I think that's what happened. But we were able, I didn't panic, so we were able to get back on, and I thank you. So these extra few minutes or something, it's make up for those few times. But I don't know if there's anything you want to say as we close out.
Well, thank you all for your continued support of House of Reawakening Minds, and it's greatly appreciated. You all know that we appreciate all of you. We really do.
We do.
You can volunteer to assist us in your technical skills and abilities by calling Dr. G during normal business hours at 302-345-0500. That's 302-345-0500. And you can also support via Cash App at cash.me $Reawaken, or PayPal at paypal.me Naila Gilliam, or money orders payable to the House of Reawakening Minds and sent to 602 Vandiver Avenue, Wilmington, Delaware Republic, zip exempt 19802. Thank you all for sharing with us tonight and having this conversation, because the real deal is Rome is trying to kill off the heirs who are the true creditors, because all the bonds are on you. They put these sureties on you to back the U.S. corporate debt, which is theirs and not yours, and is being interrupted because you're becoming more conscious and aware of the restoration of your lost estate that Noble Ali been telling you about over 100 years ago. Thank you all very much for your support. Have a grand evening.
Good night, y'all.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a I'm real